none of these platforms make it so I can launch them all at the same time.
Hopefully that'll get fixed
Oh, it's
at some
annoying.
point.
Okay.
Right.
Recorders. Oh, I gotta hit one more button. Hey everyone, welcome to the new media show. My name is Todd Cochran. Of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing terrific, Todd. It's great to be here.
It is, and I tell you, it's been a bit. It never is not busy. It's been. I mean, I've been slammed for the last. What is today? Wednesday.
It's only Wednesday, Todd.
Ever since I got back from Podcast Movement, it's like I'm eating at my desk. It's crazy, but we've got a lot going on, and internally at Blueberry, we're launching stuff, and so it's been insane. Matter of fact, we're launching a beta of our dashboard if they get all the bug fixes I found today resolved. So,
Right.
the last hurrah testing, clicking everything and making sure it does what it's supposed to do. So anyone out there that's a Blueberry customer, when we release the beta of the dashboard, use it at your own risk. But yeah, it's just been busy. Then all the other stuff that's going on in the world and watching what's happening. I do have to mention, being a vet, I have had it's been an interesting week watching things going on in Afghanistan, and my heart really goes out to those that helped us, which, I haven't been in Afghanistan since 2000 and what year would it have been? 2007. And so I just hope they got everybody out that I worked with, and because those folks put their neck on the line. So yeah, hearts go out to those folks, and Americans, of course, there as well. So I think we all can probably agree with that without it being political. So
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think the safety of Americans is certainly important.
Yep. So that's been a little bit on my mind, and I've had a few Facebook posts, kind of expressing my opinion. It's just a big damn train wreck. Excuse my expression.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say it certainly could have been handled better. But anyway, one of the big things that's been bubbling around the podcasting space the last couple days is around the impacts and the complications around exclusives, right? So when you start thinking about the domino effect of this industry moving towards exclusives and subscriptions, and thinking about what's the future of RSS, all these topics kind of converge on each other, actually, the more you dig into it.
And what makes me chuckle, Tanner, is the some of the news out today about the impact of being exclusive, and maybe being exclusive is, well, maybe good to cash the check at $100 million. But by golly, so I guess, what is that? That's over. What is, if we want to think about it two different ways, and what I'm referring to, everyone, is there is a post out by The Verge, and this writer over there, she'd been knocking it out of the ballpark. The dangers of being locked in. And that's how I'm calling it. The dangers of being locked in to a hosting or distribution platform is you could lose influence.
Yeah, I think the history of podcasting has kind of shown that to some degree. My own experience with it too. I think it logically makes sense. I think that the big variable is how much, is that impact. There's a price to pay for making a change like that. It just follows logic.
We had talked about what would happen with his show numbers and everything when he went over there.
Yeah, I mean, you can't expect everybody that follows him to want to be on the Spotify platform. right?
Well,
I mean,
some people can't get a show because it's not available in the country they live in.
yeah, well, besides that, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's fewer choices for getting his content. So of course that's going to have an impact on people. To think it's not is a little naive, actually.
But
Yeah.
Rob, it goes back to what we've talked about before. I hate to use this phrase, but we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. So let's think about it for a second.
Right.
In his case, easy choice. That big fat,
Yeah.
the bank account exploding. That,
Right.
who's going to walk away from $100 million exclusive deal? Now, there's not very many of us in the podcasting space that would do that. If they called us, Rob, and said, "You want to be exclusive on Spotify for $1 million?" You and I would be like, "Come join us over on Spotify."
Well, I don't know. In our particular situation, I'm not sure that's much of an option for us, but yeah.
Well, come on. If they came and said, "Todd and Rob will give you $1 million to come over to Spotify."
All right.
Come
I guess
on.
we could. Yeah. I guess we'd have to quit our jobs at that point, right? Because then we'd be a shill for the Spotify platform, and I don't know that that's what we want to do, right?
Right. Still, the average podcaster, bon voyage. I'm out of here, So it would have to make me even think 2 or 3 times. I'd have to say, what are their long-term ramifications of being over there?
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that for my personal show, my tech show, I think it would be devastating.
Right.
I really
and I think that's the case for most shows, actually. I mean, Joe had such a big lead against everybody else in the podcasting space that he could actually afford to lose a little bit of audience.
Right.
But what's interesting about the article, though, is it doesn't have direct access to his numbers, so they're having to extrapolate it based on other factors, right?
There was
like the impact of the new followers that his guests have on his show is one of the metrics that they use in the article to gauge the reduction in Joe's influence, right? Not necessarily, I don't know that we've been able to 100% quantify that he's lost like a third of his audience or something like that. I don't know that that's private information, right? It's not public.
They released, and I should have this all ready here. Here we go.
Don't eat me, James Cridland.
That he's been posting information that Spotify has been releasing, talking about the global top podcasts and U.S. top podcasts and the number of hours. And he did some extrapolation and came up with some numbers too.
Right.
Again, it's pure extrapolation. But to me, and I've said this, I did a presentation for 2 years. It was about if you're new to, okay, so let's leave Joe out of the conversation.
Okay.
Let's just, he's the anomaly. Let's just throw him out. And anyone else, it's a celebrity or anything like that. Let's just talk about our average 98%er, the average podcaster who's, the gal that's got together with a girlfriend or a partner or some guy in his basement or whatever you want to picture independent podcaster. And most independent podcasters are getting pretty sophisticated. So we got to quit using that term, maybe in their home studio. Okay. If that individual did not have influence in their content space before they started podcasting, I've always said that part of the reason my tech show was so successful was I gained influence. I didn't have influence at the beginning. I had none, zero. I was a horrible blogger, horrible. And then I started a podcast, and then it's not too long, and I'm drinking Macallan 18, in the GoPro booth with their CEO from covering them years before. So does that equate, me drinking Macallan with the GoPro CEO, does that equate influence? Maybe I just made a friend, but ultimately the goal was to be able to, in my show, was to be able to gain influence in the tech space and So what has that done now? That's built a team that can basically get a booth at one of the world's largest trade shows, comped, bandwidth, security, to cover the show. So they think we're influential. So the goal ultimately for the show is to gain influence, become an authority. And when someone says you're losing influence or you're losing authority, that has a direct correlation to the success of my podcast, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So if throwing Joe back in the scheme of things here, if Verge is saying he's losing influence, to me, that's like, boy, the red sirens should be going off for him.
Right. Well, I mean, to be fair to Joe, it's a complex question because there can be lots of factors that go into losing influence, right? It could be maybe his topics aren't as engaging. Maybe because he feels under pressure from Spotify to not go into extremely controversial topic areas because of his relationship with Spotify. There may be factors of maybe he's kind of burning out with his audience to some degree. Maybe that audience is moving on to other talent out there.
Could be.
Right. There's a lot of factors that go into this too. I know that the Verge article talked about how, which obviously when he shifted over from doing his videos on YouTube to only doing the videos on Spotify, his YouTube traffic plummeted.
Of course. And
it basically flatlined, which is kind of, I would imagine what happened to his still existing RSS feed that's in the podcasting space that has one episode in it. I can imagine that's growing. So it does make sense. What we don't know is what the numbers are over on Spotify, right?
Yeah.
To counterbalance this discussion. So that's what's difficult about it. But it does, Todd, I think backing up like you were trying to there for a minute, thinking about this logically, should podcasters and should the industry move towards, embracing this exclusivity stuff and putting shows behind walls and making them only available on certain platforms? That was the game, and we've talked about this on this show before. That's the game that big media companies have played with content for years. So in some ways, we're not progressing. We're actually going back.
And in the end, who's getting screwed? Usually it's the content creators.
It's the content creator. It's the strategy of exclusives. And let's be very clear about it. It was designed to benefit the platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? You're using that content as a lever to get users onto your platform, right? That doesn't always benefit the content creator. So because the content creator is focused on building as big of audience as they can. And that's where this whole discussion, if you sum it down to the bottom line, that's where this really is an important discussion to have. And then moving in this direction, like we've talked about in prior episodes too, puts RSS under threat too.
That's right.
Right. So what do we want in the podcasting industry? Do we want an open, level playing field for all content providers to distribute far and wide, and for the content creator to have total control over their content? Or are we going to allow, these big platforms to come in and dominate what we're doing? There's two arguments to this.
Well, it's a
yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir, Rob.
I know we are, but it needs to be restated again, because there's a lot of people starting to think that doing the exclusive game is the way to go.
Well, we'll leave the lights on for you as the famous low-cost hotel
Joe
chains.
Has, right? He still has his RSS feed on Libsyn, so there's just one episode in there, so just in case.
Just in case. I've really worked so hard and taken so much abuse over so many years of telling podcasters, own your brand, own your .com, build on your own website, control your feed. I've said that to him. I want to puke, and gotten so much abuse for it over the years. Not as much in recent years, but in in the early days, it was pretty brutal. All on this premises that I knew where we came from.
Right.
Not just because I'm a podcast hosting company owner. It's because I'm a podcaster and I knew what gatekeepers did to the space or were preventing to happen. Right. This space would not, podcasting would not exist if there had not been gatekeepers before. The whole premises of Adam Curry and Dave Weiner,
right,
was the ability to go around to beat the ecosystem.
To level the playing field for people that want to create content, right? Because this was a big media strategy that helped build platforms, or in those cases, studios and networks.
And if you look at YouTube, now let's just think about YouTube, Facebook, and Google. And they're all two and one, right? What did YouTube do is purely brilliant, because they made a platform for people to come in and share video content where all could be coalesced under one whole ecosystem. We're streaming live right now on YouTube Live. We're on Facebook Live. We got people watching. They made this beautiful thing where people could come in, and then what has happened over the years is they've tightened up the monetization restrictions. They've run more ads. They've censored content. They've shadow banned content. They've done all these things that we're so against in the podcasting space.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes podcasting still the only true free open medium that's left. Let's be frank. What else is open? It's nothing. What else is open? Podcasting is it. Everything else is on a controlled platform. Twitter, Facebook, all of that is on closed loop, controlled, moderated platforms.
Right.
What else? Blogs. I guess blogs still exist in the open. Podcasts are open. Someone else in the audience, help me. What else is open? That's truly open that the man doesn't control on the web. Is there anything? There's probably more.
I don't think at the scale that podcast.
No, not at scale. There's the individual pieces here. Yeah, you can do e-commerce you can do an e-commerce by yourself. So from that instance, you can still do business.
And in some degree, like a self-hosted WordPress is kind of it does play into that same paradigm.
Right, it does. So I think that when you have these big entities with such huge reach, you think about the reach that iHeart, Pandora, Spotify, YouTube, all these platforms, they have these great reach. And we're all getting the benefits of that reach. So don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing them. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I always think it could be taken away tomorrow. Because these are businesses that have bottom lines, and they could change their model at any given point, and they do. And what if you're part of Google does it all the time on search results. You might be you may win or you may lose when Google makes a change. So the way I look at it is I'll still at least have my website if I pay the bill.
Right. Todd, I wanted to mention something else and get your thoughts on this too, but the article that was put out by Michael, who's the head of Anchor podcasts, about the change that they made to making RSS a requested option.
Oh, did he write an article on that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a blog. Yeah, it was kind of like a blog post.
Is he listening?
Anything, and I doubt it, but I'm going to be writing an article. I'm actually mostly done with the article that's going to quote him about this topic, about the case that he made in that article for why they made this switch from, making RSS feeds required with every show that was created in Anchor, making that optional, and then also at the same time removing the automatic submission feature over to Apple, which was, so their justification for this was creator control, Todd. We want to empower the creator to have choice in what platforms they want to have their show available in.
Wow.
Right. So if, and my comment back, and I'm going to talk about this in the article too, is that's like the perfect play to play into exclusive content. Right.
Yeah,
that's the argument that a platform would make to say that really the best choice is having your show only with us.
Yes, you can be exclusive on Spotify.
Right. So now all those new podcasters, which kind of is a double-edged sword, right? It cuts against them and cuts for them at the same time, which is really rather ironic. Your position has been, it's like, shh, don't say anything, because they're kind of cutting their own throat here. But
Rob, why are you posting a blog post? Come on. They're
actually cutting their own throat, is what they're doing at the same time. But maybe they don't realize it, or maybe this is a strategy to kind of deceive a little bit. I don't know.
Oh, would you say it's a strategy to? Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm going to piss a bunch of people off. So if you are someone that knows nothing about podcasting, and you think, gosh, I want to be a podcaster, here's this free service, let me go over there and get on that, and I can be exclusive on Spotify, that makes me feel real special.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that sounds good. And they just don't know any better. Until they listen to the Todd and Rob on the New Media Show and say, what has happened?
Right. And you look at what's happening to Joe Rogan, which there's thousands of podcasters
losing influence.
Be Joe Rogan, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly looking like the trajectory of his show is growth. Sure, he made a bunch of money, but
money's a pretty big motivator.
Right. It is. But let's say Joe decided tomorrow that he was going to go back to his RSS feed again.
Well, he can't. He's under contract.
I understand that, but let's say the contract expires, he makes the shift back again. Would his show start to grow again?
Good question.
I don't know.
Would he feel constrained, no longer constrained? Would he no longer feel constrained to play politics? We're not saying that he is, but maybe.
Well, and get deeper into more controversial topics that actually drive audience.
Mm-hmm.
And feel less like there's somebody telling him what he can and can't do.
Right. We need to stop doing the show and giving out multi-million dollars worth of advice.
Well, we're trying to help podcasters make good decisions here. That's what that's what I want.
They're not listening to this show.
Podcasters aren't?
Well, they're listening to they're getting advice on Facebook from those who have been lured in by the little shining lure that suck them in.
Right.
And ultimately they don't, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this right now do not agree with me. And that's fine. Please send your email to todd@blueberry.com or robg@libsyn.com. Tell us your thoughts. But I
Yeah.
I could say more. I'm just going to make more people angry. But, and hey, I am on Spotify. This show is on Spotify. We're happy to be over there. But
it's kind of how you approach this, right?
Mhm.
It's not so much that we're saying that you shouldn't be on these
Sure.
platforms,
Sure.
but it's like turning the tables, right? It's I kind of say it almost like in the stance of what you do with, let's say, a credit card, right? If you're smart, you use the credit card to buy things for a whole month, and you put off actually paying for them for a month, and at the end of the month you pay off the credit card bill,
Yep.
right?
Yep, I do. And
That's
every once in a while, I have to pay a little bit more the following month because I didn't pay it all off the first month. But yeah, usually we try
okay.
to clear the bill
Yeah,
and
so
not incur
that's
interest.
yeah, and so that's an analogy, right?
Yeah.
Using that Visa as something to your advantage, right? Because I've been of this opinion for a long time that I don't get credit card offers from credit card companies because
You don't
because
hold a balance.
well, they think of me as a deadbeat
Right.
because I don't have a carryover balance,
Right. Right.
right? So they don't advocate for me to get another credit card.
Yeah.
Even though I can go to any bank I want right now and get a credit card.
But they're still making their 2.5-3% on the front end against the merchant.
Right.
Yeah. So they're not
Exactly.
losing out.
Right. So I sign up for the reward programs.
Right.
So I actually earn points that I can buy against when I go to Amazon,
Sure.
but I don't pay any interest. I don't
Right.
pay any card fees or anything. So to the banks, I'm kind of like a half of a customer, right? So
Mhm.
they don't really care about me. But people that have poor credit, people that don't pay their balances every month, they get flooded with credit card offers every day, right? Those are the people that they want. It's kind of like this. Let's use these platforms to our advantage. Don't play into their advantage. Play into
Oh,
your advantage.
you brought that analogy home. Bravo. We need an applause emoji. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. Let's take our pound of flesh out of them.
Right.
But I did get some response.
Mm.
So, no, I cannot buy into podcasts that are not in 2 tiers of inventory. So there is Spotify exclusives, and then there are Spotify, I call them second tier partners, and then everyone else falls below the line, and no, you currently, at least me, could not buy against those shows. Because I was
Right.
I was going to buy against this show and run an ad in front of this show on Spotify if I could do it. And I couldn't. And I tried, but they said that inventory is not available. So that tells you something in another instance too.
Right.
But
There's
for how
still
long?
some limitations to what they can do.
But for how long?
Right.
For how
Well,
long?
I think it depends on how unified this community is around the principles that we want to stand on.
So it goes back to what we talked about in an earlier show. Is it time? To I don't like to use the word union, but is it time to organize and start putting all this content underneath a wrapper? So
Right. And building a unifying thought process on Spotify is kind of not the idea, which is what Michael from Anchor was trying to do by saying that, we're giving the content creator choice on where they put their podcasts.
Yeah.
Right.
So do we, and so do you. You can be anywhere you
Right.
want,
Right.
not just one place. We give you choice. Yeah, that's
Right.
that's the irony. It's such a wordplay.
It is.
My God.
It is.
Podcasting is am I using the right analogy, the epitome, or the right term, the epitome of choice?
Yeah. It is, and it's always been that way, and it's really the origins of this medium, and it gets back to Todd, like this show really represents is we're defenders of the culture of podcasting that has been with us for 17 years, and what we raise objection to are the things that kind of there's interest and desire out there to take advantage of us.
It's not what is, it's what could happen. This is
Right.
what we're trying to prevent.
Right.
It's and it's creeping. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like the Chinese. They have the Chinese government has 100-year plan. And they just
Right.
little by little, they do the things they need to get things done, to get things where they want to be. And this is what happens with big companies. They say, well, here's our 5-year strategy. Shh. Now we're not going to talk about
Yeah.
what we're going to do in 2, 3, 4, and 5, but here's the strategy. Here's the incremental steps we're going to take to take over, to be the overlords of podcasting.
Yeah. Well, some actually are much more outward about that, right, than others.
Yeah,
But
it's true.
yeah, I would say that that is to be expected. You know, that companies have a strategy and they have an approach to capture more market share, get larger, grow revenue. That's what they're in business to do. So I can't really fault them for doing that because that's what they do. But
they have
us-
shareholders to respond to.
right. Content creators just need to recognize that and not fall into the trap
Right.
if they don't want to. Sure. Joe Rogan fell into the trap.
No, he
because
didn't
they
fall in the
gave him
track.
100
He didn't fall in the track, Robbie. He cashed in. You can't
I
say.
know that's what I was just about to say. He fell into the trap and he got $100 million.
Well, woohoo.
Right. It came raining down from the sky onto his life.
You
right?
know, so winner, chicken dinner. He hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
It's just like,
But I'm sure Toddy has a good little exit clause too.
but I had a friend of mine that hit $5,000 on a slot machine the other day, and and guess what? There was a price for that. 30%. 30% tax was withheld from that $5,000.
Yeah.
Or actually, it was
but
one.
Todd-
So there's a tax for
Right.
winning.
Well, and Todd, also, I'll raise another little funny point on this. Who is really responsible for Joe Rogan's show declining in influence? Is it Joe or is it Spotify?
Oh, good question. Depends. And I don't listen to Joe's show, so someone that listens to Joe's show is going to have to tell us, has the show changed? I don't know. I don't know if it's changed. I haven't listened. I listened to the episode with Adam Curry on it. That's the only episode I've ever listened to of Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah,
And-
I've watched
And it was
probably
it was
a dozen of them.
it was so discombobulated all over the place. You think this show's crazy? My God! But he does it in a way that works.
I mean, yeah. And at the end of the day, he did a licensing deal. So those kind of deals can be pulled out of. I mean, I'm sure that they have a term.
Oh, I'm sure.
I don't know if the deal involved any stock in the company or any kind of deeper engagement layer with him, with the company. But, I mean, obviously Spotify is using him to grow users.
Mm-hmm.
And it appears that has been relatively successful. But Joe obviously is maybe paying a price for that $100 million too.
Potentially, yes.
The bigger question is, if he would have kept growing his show as an RSS feed, could he actually have earned more revenue than what he's making from Spotify?
Hmm.
That's another bigger question. Plus, he wasn't even on Spotify before he did that deal.
Right. So, I think all of us would heavily consider moving to a platform exclusively if they gave us enough money. So let's just give that as a given. And then let's then go back to what's going to happen for the 99.5% rest of us that don't get a deal like that.
Yeah.
So the strategy that was presented on this show some time ago by a podcaster about going exclusive on the platform, I wonder how Tanner has intercepted this information. And I wonder if he's thinking about maybe it's not rethinking the idea of being exclusive to one platform.
Well, I think he's thinking about it right now in regards to Fireside. And I have seen a group of content creators over there definitely contemplating that. But I did a session over there.
Fire who?
Fireside
Who?
Chat.
Who?
Yeah.
Fireside who?
Fireside, right.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, and it's very similar to, Clubhouse. I just did a session over there, but they did add video. There's a video layer to this too.
Based on what Mr. Mark Cuban said to the podcasting community, Fireside is dead to me. So,
yeah, it's.
I've seen your
not
tweet.
sure that he had a clear perspective on.
No, I've seen your guys' tweets.
who he was talking to and what the culture of this medium is, and it gets
that resonated with us,
that.
But did it resonate with other podcasters at Podcast Movement? Did they even understand the ramifications? Did they understand they were being talked down to?
I think so. I think I think so. Yeah. Just like people have always remembered the former CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs.
Oh yeah,
making a comment in a keynote about Amateur Hour, right?
Yep. There's this great the No Agenda show has this great audio thing, and someone out there, maybe we can steal it for us and clip it and send it over. It's a very appropriate clip to be played at this time. It's I won't say it. Those that listen to the show know the one I'm looking for. that they could be played when people are, I'll be quiet right now. Someone that's listening to the show will know the clip I'm looking for and will send it to me, and then we'll play it on a future show. Can I be obtuse enough or obscure enough?
Todd, did you see the article that Brian Burletta wrote? I think it was the 24th. So it was yesterday? Talking about Apple.
Yeah, we talked about that on this show.
About, his comment in here about how he thinks that auto downloads should have been removed.
Yeah, we talked about that in this show.
Oh, did we? Okay.
Yeah, remember we talked about it was a interesting insight. Okay, let's back up. Since the beginning of time, since podcasting begun, we do not know if they actually listened to the show. Okay?
Right.
From the beginning. How have we been able to determine if they listened to the show? Well, when the Apple Podcast app came along, as history would say, if you didn't listen to a show after 3, 4, 5 times, the app would stop auto-downloading, and then you would have to tell it to resume downloading on the episode you wanted to do.
Yeah. That
is the case today. But for a short period of time, there was a bug in podcast land where it didn't auto-download anything.
Right.
So people saw their numbers, and we talked about this on the show. People saw their numbers drop a little bit. Some saw their numbers drop a little bit. This is the kicker. This is the kicker here, because I have the master list. Some shows saw a drop, and it really boils down to is that drop really kind of is equivalent to maybe no one's really listening to those downloaded episodes.
Yeah.
But, and this is where I have contention, oftentimes I will listen in spurts. So as an example, I will go 2-3 weeks before I do like a catch-up spurt for a podcast that's maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes long. I'll listen to them consecutively, just like Netflix. Bing, 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 bing. They have downloaded and they've set in my device, and then I get on an airplane or I get on a road trip, and I'll play 2 or 3 or 4 episodes consecutively of the single show. And I think a lot of people still consume the media that way.
Right.
So what if during that period I was not binge listening to a show?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a certain amount of those that I would have listened to that would have been pre-downloaded that wouldn't have, in other words, I would have got to them at some point. Not everyone listens to a show immediately. My podcast has to be listened to immediately. Has to. Or in 96 hours, it's the content's old.
Yeah.
Other shows,
it's news type content.
so other shows I know I don't have to rush to listen to. I know I can listen to them when I want to. I don't typically get way behind, but I could be a month behind on listening to podcasts. And in podcast advertising, we see something very interesting that Brian should take into account. Is typically when you're doing, and maybe, these companies that do a 30-day buy always say they're screwing themselves, because the way podcasts are really consumed is not necessarily the way radio's consumed. Radio's listened to now. If we produce this show tomorrow, people will listen to this show 2 weeks from now. Right. So I always tell when we start advertising campaigns, what do we see for the first, on host-read endorsed advertising, that the ad's built in, it's not being ad inserted. What we see is response to those ads takes about 2 weeks to come up on target. And then then there's about 2 weeks lead. Now, the outage was longer. The Apple bug was longer. So, but still, most people are not, if you guys think about it, listen to podcasts right now, how often are you anxiously waiting to listen to a show? Or do you have a specific time and place that you listen to a podcast? I do. I listen to certain shows at certain times, certain places.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two ways to look at it. But yeah, it's true. It was people should have a little bit of a raised eyebrow. Be careful what you wish for, though.
Right.
So if we shut off auto downloading, then advertising is going to have to change. Advertising deals are not going to perform as well, or maybe they'll perform just as good as they have.
Well, yeah. I think it complicates the issue, but in some ways, I think the case that Brian was making was more, it displays an intent to listen to what his argument is, right? And that given that podcasting is a progressive download medium, getting rid of the auto download feature basically forces the listener to take action at the beginning to consume the content, not have it just show up. And because the auto download feature really in the early days of podcasting was done for different reasons than what we're talking about today. But it, fundamentally though, it's the same, it's time shifted consumption.
Yeah.
Right. But the assumption is that the device that you were listening on didn't always have an always connected experience on it. And I think what's happened over the years is that more and more of our devices have had more and more connectivity, right?
Sure.
So the utility of having that download to store to play back later kind of is diminished, right?
Well, we've seen it diminish for years.
Right.
We've seen that curve of people that I call active playing. It's kind of the term I use. They actively click play, and but again, even that, there's no guarantee, because some devices, when you click play, will download the whole episode within a couple of minutes.
Right.
There's only a segment of devices that actually truly chunk it. So, truth be told, doesn't mean that they're still listening to the show. Maybe they listened for the first 10 minutes, but they did click play. But so
I kind of wonder if this discussion is really seeded by the bigger agenda, which is getting rid of downloads entirely.
Of course.
So auto downloads is at an extreme, but I haven't heard the Brian and others talk about getting rid of downloads to a device entirely, right? Which you would think would be kind of the other component to this. So I don't know what we're seeing around people that are just manually downloading. The auto download is probably still taking the largest share of the store and playback kind of thing.
I don't think so.
Right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? It's still bigger, or
I think active play is bigger now than people that are actually auto downloading.
Right. No, but I'm just talking about somebody that would download the episode, activate the download to have it store on your device, not so much be auto downloaded.
Oh,
just manually download it. I haven't seen anybody talk about
the only ones I manually download are the ones when Apple tells me, oh, by the way, you haven't listened to this show for 5 times. Do you really want to start re-downloading? That's the only time I initiate re-download.
Right, and that triggers the auto download.
Right, because then, and it only does it on one file. You have to, if you want the previous episodes, you got to go click to get them, and that's oftentimes when I'm getting ready to get on an airplane or, go on a road trip. Where I live, where my compound is, where I call it the compound, where my loft is at, T-Mobile sucks. So if I didn't have Wi-Fi, there would be no on-demand connectivity, and even then it's horrible. So again, I'm an outlier because live in rural America.
Right.
And come on, Elon Musk with Starlink, please hurry the heck up.
Brian also used the contention that when Apple had their download bug, right, their auto download bug, that the downloads dropped 31%, and his automatic contention is that that must be all the auto downloads. I'm not sure that that's really true.
We didn't see 31%.
Right, because that's a too big of a number.
Here's the thing. If you're only promoting Apple Podcasts on your show, maybe it was 31%. But a smart podcaster has many options for a listener to subscribe and listen to their show.
Right. Well, unless you're exclusive.
My show, my tech show, it's about 50% are subscribed via Apple Podcasts. Right. The other 50 are everywhere else. So most shows, there's a lot. I'm shocked oftentimes when I go kind of snooping around looking at stats. There's shows that have 80, 90% of their downloads strictly on Apple Podcasts. And if you go look at their show site, it's very obvious why. That's the only thing they're promoting. So we've also done a bad job as podcasters of giving our listeners diverse listening opportunities and shoehorning them into specific platforms.
Yeah.
But, be careful what you wish for. You want to shut the download off? Well, okay. It doesn't change very much. But what it does do is it changes the notion that we are time-shifted content consumption to more linear in nature. It's still kind of time-shifted, but it's, I guess people don't use DVRs anymore because there's so much stuff available on Netflix and YouTube, and people just go watch stuff on demand. Maybe they listen to stuff on demand. Times have changed for sure from consumption standpoint.
Todd, also I found another article that was written here too by Julika Williams saying that the download, podcasting's metric king, gets dethroned. So this, I don't know what the date was. It doesn't have a date on here, but the quote in here is measuring podcast success and setting advertising rates on a faulty CPM formula built on an inflated unit of measure could lead to serious consequences, maybe even a analytics bubble.
Oh, how far we've come.
Yes, right. Well, it's the desire to I mean, I can see where it's coming from a good place, right?
Yeah.
There is too much ambiguity in podcast metrics.
There shouldn't be.
Well, I mean, it's did people listen? Did they not listen? I keep hearing this all the time, right?
Yeah.
That the ad buyers want to buy on impressions, they want to buy audience, they want to buy listens, they want to buy. Nobody wants to have anything to do with downloads.
But yet they
right?
still all bill on downloads. Right,
of course, right? Because we haven't invented or innovated our way out of this dilemma, Todd. So, that's the struggle, and people keep thinking about this from a theoretical perspective instead of looking at it from a technical technology, reality-based outlook. Right?
So here's the deal. They want to bill on impressions and on listens or whatever we want to call it. They don't want to call it a download. Then what they have to do is if they get 1,000 downloads, then they have to bill on less than that. They have to bill on a number that's below 1,000.
The old saying, be careful what you wish for.
They
you may not like it.
They have to bill because there's no such thing as an imaginary listen or impression. So if you had 1,000 downloads and you don't know who listened to your show, and you're going to say, I'm going to do this on audience impression and listens, then you come up with a formula, and I'm going to just give you one. Let's use 31%. Let's use 31%. And now you can only bill for 690 impressions. Someone tell me I'm wrong.
I think somebody tried that, Todd. I think it was Podcast One.
No. Well, no. The difference between Podcast One, Rob, was they took 1,000 downloads and they multiplied by 6. And they said we got 6,000 impressions on 1,000 downloads. Now, who? Okay.
No. The principle when I was there, unfortunately, was the filtering was done by a survey data, as you recall.
Oh,
right, of a percentage of what the survey data told
what the
us
survey says
was how much of that audio show was listened to, right? So that's what the filter was for the metric. So you take raw log data, right, which is like 6 or 10 times inflated, and you apply this listening metric of 85% in a 72-hour window.
You take an IEB measured. You take an IEB filtered number.
Right.
Please, anyone out there, let me get my money out. All right. Okay, so here we go. 20, 40, 60, 80, $100. Here's $100.
Right.
All right, here's 100. I'm showing it on the show.
Wow.
All right. So there's $100. Now, we're going to put it right here. Put it right up on the monitor. Someone tell me how, if you have 1,000 measured downloads, how you can bill for more in any possible scenario for more than 1,000. How can you bill for more than 1,000 if you only had 1,000 downloads, qualified downloads?
Is to count the ads that are supposedly heard.
Okay, no. Hold on. Okay, so let's say you have one ad in the show, and you had
just one ad, not like 4 or 5.
Nope, you had one ad, pre-roll, mid-roll. I don't care. How do you bill for more than 1,000? How do you get to 5,000 impressions on 1,000 downloads? How do you get there?
You have to have ads.
No. You have one ad. How do you get to 5,000 impressions that you can bill on those 1,000 downloads?
Oh, well, you inflate the numbers.
Oh. So if we have a flawed system, according to this blog post,
Mm-hmm.
then they have to take less. They have to take less.
Yeah. I
They-
think some ad agencies have been discounting what they're willing to pay on CPMs to certain networks for this same dilemma.
So someone
That's been going on for years now.
Here's the $100. So how do you bill if you had 1,000 downloads?
Right.
All right, 1,000 plays, whatever we want to call it. The log file said there was that media got 1,000 downloads. And if we're so wrong, how do you bill for more? And if someone can tell me that and prove science wrong, that, here's 5, 6, how many years ago did we start the IAB stuff?
I believe it was 2014.
We had some people in that initial discussions that were saying exactly what I'm saying today. They were extrapolating out this data, and we basically you can't beat the log data. You can't. You throw out the bots, throw out the duplicates. You just, I don't care if you count even for, okay, let's say that someone comes into my office and there's 10 people in here. They're all connected to my Wi-Fi, and they say, hey, I want you to all subscribe to the New Media Show and download the last 5 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, within a 24-hour period, there will be some underreporting. But Charlie has a Samsung. Tony has an Apple phone. Someone else is in there. One's using Pocket Cast. One's using Overcast. One's using Apple Podcast. So really, the numbers aren't that different because we've got different devices. So in the end, you can't get much over. Okay,
I mean, Todd, in some ways, this whole debate conversation maybe made mute
in
the future. Mute.
How's it going to be made mute?
By listener privacy.
True, but let me throw one more at you. All right, let's say you're going to do some sort of play. You're going to have some prey or impression mechanism you're going to build to.
Right.
And that 1,000 now has turned into 700. You've been billing for years for 1,000. That 700 then all of a sudden means, guess what it means, Rob? It's an amazing thing. The same thing we talked about during podcast measurement guidelines was that now the content's more valuable because it's been delivering at a performance you were expecting. You're paying for 1,000, delivering 700 and getting the performance of 1,000. So now the ad value's more. So now we tell the advertiser, okay, we're going to only measure on impressions. So what was 1,000 is now 700. So now you're going to pay 45 instead of 35. Because we were delivering value to you and what you thought was great results at 35, but we were over-reporting by 300. So now that we've lowered our reporting, we're going to up the rate. How's that going to work out?
Right. Well, Todd, I mean, this whole conversation also leads into questioning even the IAB's metric standard of counting a full download, right? So, even though there's only 60 seconds of content that's been downloaded.
Remember, that's the minimum counting standard.
I understand that. I understand that, but
there is
if you do a show that's 60 seconds long, you may or may not get counted, first of all, but it also means that, let's say a person listened to 60 seconds and then turned it off.
Sure.
So there is this, there's so many issues with this, right? That go both ends of the spectrum. I mean, you could say to the IAB metric standard, well, we're not going to count a download until the whole damn thing is downloaded.
Some of us don't.
Yeah. Not 60 seconds worth of data, right? Which is what the metric standard says.
Some of us count partials. Some of us know when a file.
Partials can only be wedged back against how much total data there is, right, in the file versus how much data was actually downloaded of the file before the transfer stopped, right? And you can probably back into the number of how many minutes into the content that was, but it has nothing to do with how much was listened to.
Exactly. You still don't know if it's been listened to.
So because there's no mapping for that, guess where that data comes from? That comes from the listening platforms.
Right. And guess what? You think we're going to... Rob.
All these are pointing back to the listening platforms, all these issues.
Rob, would you like to have client-side data?
Yes, everyone would love to have
it. Because then
that's the answer to all these problems.
All of this. But guess what? We're not going to get it.
Well, I think as an industry, we need to all put a lot of pressure on figuring out a way to get it.
Okay. Go tell Marco Arment that.
I'm happy to. I'm gonna get him on this show and justify his position on that. If listeners' privacy
we can protect listener privacy
by the law, there's no reason why we can't have that data.
Apple will never.
Well, same with Apple.
They will never, ever, ever give.
Their mantra is they don't want listeners to be tracked.
That doesn't have nothing to do with tracking. Let's say we could absolutely Apple today, right this second, could put together an API and could give us anonymized play data for every single play that happens on Apple Podcasts. They could give us that client data back. They could today, but they will never, ever, 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 ever do that.
Okay. Well, there's going to have to be a price to pay for that.
Yeah, yes, there is.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? Suck it up, Buttercup. You've got the IAB podcast measurement guidelines. You bill by that and make or break yourself, or you bill less based upon listener impressions. And anyone that says, I get 1,000 downloads, I can bill for 2,000 impressions, please come on this show and justify to me how you get to that number.
Right. And the more of us in the industry that push for this to get client-side data from the listening apps in an anonymized way that is respectful of listener privacy, the more pressure that's going to be put on Apple to figure out a way to do it.
They'll never do it.
That may be the case.
They'll never do it.
Right. And I think that there's many in the industry and feel the same way. But, but we're never going to get over this discussion around downloads.
Rob, we've been talking about this for 10 years.
Probably longer
Same
than that.
thing.
I started out in this medium streaming.
Right.
Real streaming.
Yeah.
Not this progressive download garbage.
Right.
So, and I saw what that was able to provide.
Sure. It provides.
And the radio industry pushes for this too. And I'm hearing more and more, Todd, that the radio industry is really pushing for programmatic ad buying and buying across huge numbers of shows.
Because there's an inventory shortage right now.
I know, and I'm hearing that there is a big radio-related platform that's basically enabling ad buys across 200,000 podcasts right now. So I don't know how that's really working, but
I don't think the number's that high.
There's barely that many active podcasts in the space, so it's a little hard to understand unless some of these are not really true podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hearing big numbers getting thrown around, and I'm like, maybe I should question that, but I don't know. But anyway,
so
I'm getting tired of this battle around downloads.
I'm not battling it. I'm just hanging. I'm watching along for the ride. And guess what? The beauty about this is there's at least 50% of active podcasters that they don't care. They don't care about monetization. What do they care about? They care about growing their shows.
This is much bigger than just a conversation about monetization. This is, if things go down the way they might with the listener privacy crackdowns, we may get cut off from getting any data on how big your audience is.
True.
So
maybe again, Rob, you quit projecting. I
know, but that's what we're supposed to do on this show, Todd. We're supposed to raise concerns.
So, all right, we know you're listening. If you go down the road, hypothetically, and you're going to anonymize all podcast traffic going into your device, then I'm with Rob. We're going to be like, hey, the content doesn't, okay, set my business aside. Set Rob's business aside.
Right.
We're here as creators.
Right.
We love our stats. If we're cut off, then our livelihood is affected. Potentially. Our ability and motivation to create content is cut off. If a podcaster, podcasters are, I have podcasters that come into our stat system, they hit refresh every 30 seconds. Refresh on the page. Refresh on the page. All day long, they're hitting refresh on the page. Coming back every 50 minutes, hit refresh. If podcasters are cut off from their statistics, it's got a bigger ramification than privacy. It's got a ramification. There's going to be fewer shows. There's
going to be fewer shows, and the shows that will exist will be behind paywall platforms.
And the space will be forever decimated. So,
I mean, unless you're okay with losing the significance of RSS open distribution, because that's what's under threat here, is that ultimately the distribution of this audio content will no longer be podcasts. It'll just be audio content that'll be available on these big proprietary platforms that are able to adhere to the privacy laws.
And then those big platforms will say, well, that show's cluttering us up. That show's cluttering us up. We don't want that one. And
they're talking about something that doesn't comply to our particular standards on content.
Oh, right. We already know who the biggest slasher of content in that regard is. So,
right.
They'll say up.
Copyright violations. I mean, you just go down the list of
so this has much bigger ramifications than Todd or Rob's business in providing stats. The trickle-down effect is going to be very bad.
Yeah, so, I mean, what we're trying to communicate here is just the extrapolation of what we're seeing happen, really outside of the podcasting industry that's making this happen. It's not really being necessarily driven by anybody in the podcast industry, even though I think some of the big players in the industry are going to benefit from it. Yeah.
It's your choice out there, Apple.
We can either fight it or we just roll over and let it roll us over, right?
Again, we're speculating that you might do this.
Well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess it's the not doing it.
I don't want to cry. I don't want to get podcasters freaking out. I don't want, because you guys are just crying wolf. I don't want to.
Well, it's sharing just basic listener activity, right?
Yeah. Because I'm going to be kind of honest, Apple, your stats still kind of suck. that dashboard.
Well, and that concerns me too, Todd. I mean, we're given the keys to these guys, and these guys aren't really responsible with it at this point. They're not IAB compliant, typically.
It's just this: if the stats were more on parity, I would have less
Right.
heartburn.
Less
But
concerns. Right.
but the stats kind of suck.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's not a priority to them. Why?
Oh, I
Why
know.
would I mean, that's been our job.
Right.
Is to be the hosting platforms are the ones that are really, have been charged with this responsibility. And with these privacy changes, it may take us out of the stats business.
Well, there's a way to do this without killing it. Do we need all the octals of the IP? No, we don't need all the octals of the IP to figure out, we can adjust for having a few less octals. So example, 192.168.1.2, is that enough? Is that all we need? Is that enough to anonymize?
Right.
If I don't have, or .1, if I don't have a subset of 99 octals or something like that, is that enough anonymizing? So it still gets me in the ballpark of where that traffic's coming from, and I can probably do enough of manipulation of the spec to overcome and account for, because we're going to be able to look at old new data. We're going to see how the numbers change but if you anonymize the whole IP, game over. If everyone comes out of Apple at 255, 255, 255, 255, it's game over for stats. Well, what we'll be forced to do is we'll be forced to count every one of those and just put a number on it. There'll be no more filtering. It'll be major inflation. Because we'll just count. Well, maybe not. Well, actually, Rob,
I don't think you would have to. Yeah, I don't think that it would be default inflated. I think we'd just be using a different, like hash or something like that to report back to the server, right?
Well, if you think about, we've done when I can pull data and basically we know, and I okay, so don't quote me on this, but like if we look at 30 days worth of activity on a single episode, it's like, and again, looking at 30 days, not 24 hours, but looking at 30 days, we see an IP, a unique IP. So let's say 192.168.1.250. And if we see 192.168.1.250 a second time for that same episode, that is like I think it used to be like 13% or something like that. It was low that we would see that IP a second time. Now, a third time, it was like 2-3% that we'd see that IP a third time over a 30-day period of time. So,
Right.
So in that regard, even though we're not allowed to count the same IP twice or three times, whatever the rule is. Again, I don't want to quote the spec here because I don't have it in front of me. And it's been a while since I looked at it, but we have rules on how many times we can count an IP within a 24-hour period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what that is, once or twice, something like that.
Right. Exactly.
And
I think it's a once. Right?
again, those of you that are reading the spec every day, you can come and tell me, or go read it yourself. That is not really a big filtering factor because we don't see that IP again. We don't see it
Right.
come back and get the same episode again.
Yeah.
A small percentage of the time. So if I had, as an example, if I had 1,000 downloads and we see an IP come in a second time on 13%, and that raises the number to 1,130 downloads, so I've counted it twice. In the scheme of things, is that really going to make an impact? If you're dealing with millions of downloads, maybe, but again, if we're looking at 24-hour window, and we've expanded it out to 30 days and looked at the repeat traffic. So I think that, we'll find a way to report the data, but we don't have to go to extremes of making it all the same IP. Octal it down and we'll be okay. Or what I should ask Angelo to run is how many times we see an IP within a segment. So that 256 segment, that's what we need to have them run, Rob. Run the log file and say, okay, if the IP was 72-3-46, how many times did we see IPs on a single episode within that 256 block? How many times did we see a download on that episode in that range?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it gets into IPv6, then it's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, I was just about to ask about how this all plays into IPv6, because I don't believe that too many people are well, I guess there's a growing list of people that are starting to support IPv6, and that presents a interesting challenge for platforms that are doing advertising.
I can't talk to, I don't think it's been made public. Some studies, some podcasting companies have done. But what we have found even with IPv6 data is, even though some of those octals, and again, probably I'm not using the right word. So again, I'm not like super geek, so don't blast on me here. But yeah. So let me get an example here.
Go ahead.
What does an IPv6 address look like? Okay, here we go. So an IPv address looks something like this. It's like 2001 semicolon 0DB8 semicolon 8583 semicolon 000 semicolon 000 semicolon 8A2E semicolon 0370 semicolon 7334. Okay, so that's an IPv6.
Todd, we should probably define for people what IPv6 is. We've been mainly
so an IPv6 is a group of 8 4-hexadecimal digits, and each group represents 16 bits.
Yeah, it's an IP address.
It's an IP address, yeah.
Longer and there's more of them.
Right. And again, you can go Google this. And so what one company has done is they are on IPv6, and they've been looking at IPv6s are really were designed so that the original thought process is that your phone would get an IPv6 address and you would keep it forever. Well, that's not how it's been implemented. It's been implemented. You might have 24 IPv6 addresses within a 24-hour period or more, maybe 100, maybe 200. Right. So what does that do when you start downloading an episode and your IPv6 address changes 3 times during the day, or 10 times, or 100 times, and you've come back to that episode and listened a little, then really what it could end up looking like is 5 downloads. But the study that was done is that an octet, again, I think I'm using the right word, certain number of octets in. So let's, as example, that big number I just gave you, what they found in this, and again, I'm paraphrasing the study, is that at a certain point, let's say 2001, 0DB8, 8583, 4 zeros, 82E8, that number stayed the same, and the only thing changed was the last 2 octets. So even though you were getting a new one, it was really kind of the same way when you're moving around in your neighborhood with your cell phone. Your IP changes just a little, maybe, change towers, but it stays pretty close to the subset you were in. So
yeah, but you don't want to only look at those last 2 digits.
Right. That's, you're not just looking at that. You're looking at the type of, the Apple Podcast, whatever it's, whatever's pulling the data.
Right. Well, because more digits can change over time. Right. So you want to be looking at all of them.
So they did a study where they basically started backing out and saying, okay, what if we didn't count the last 2 octets or 3 octets or whatever it was? What does that do in a A/B comparison when they had IPv4 data overlaid with IPv6? And there's a solution there to get there to count.
Right.
And
but it does add another level of metrics processing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole nother level of cost structure for people trying to track this stuff too. So because you're having to filter out stuff, you're having to combine things and then map things,
Yeah.
so there's another layer to this
Mm-hmm.
going from the IPv4 to IPv6. And actually most of the podcast hosting platforms out there, and what's interesting is that most of the ones that are not supporting IPv6 are the ones that are doing the most advertising. If you look at the list, at least as of 2020, so which is about a year ago or so, most of the really big platforms in podcasting don't support IPv6.
I think we're just, if we just focus on stats, not worry about the advertising piece, as long as we're,
I mean, it's stats.
There's,
right.
there is a solution here to be able to still provide good stats and be able to, in my opinion, IPv4 addresses are PII. Blueberry takes that as we believe an IPv4 address is PII, and when it's connected to the right database.
Is a IPv6 IP considered PI?
I can't answer that at this point.
PI information.
I can't. But if Apple is going back to the Apple discussion, if Apple is concerned, and if they have taken on the same mantra that an IPv4 address is PII, if they've decided that, then we can fix the IPv4 thing without going to draconian measures of giving everyone the same IP address when it runs through the word I'm trying to come up with here is you can buy these all over the place when you're on international travel, so you can still listen to Netflix. VPN. Is that the right word? No, not VPN. Someone will help me.
What do you?
It's basically when you anonymize yourself on the internet. It's basically what Apple's doing is they're putting maybe it is a VPN, not a VPN.
Well, I mean, it accomplishes the same thing.
Yeah.
VPN, right.
So maybe that's the word I was actually looking for, but
yeah, it creates a private tunnel that's based on encryption. So there's no way to detect an exchange of information.
So if we're just trying to protect PII, we can still feed the content creator the data they need to grow their show and support their show.
Right.
Without going to draconian measures of anonymizing everything. But it goes back to, and here's the kicker of it. Apple's got all this information. You don't think that they know everything. They know who you are. They know everything.
Because you've been able to opt into their terms of service.
They know everything.
Right.
And I was rudely informed that all apps, because there's some sort of identifier, the people that have apps aren't going to be affected too much either. Oh, crap. I forgot to put my phone on.
Oh, when somebody dialed in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just seeing an article talking about how if a podcast host is not supporting IPv6, which many of the podcast hosting platforms, the names that are most familiar to you are not currently, at least as of 2020, you are likely losing the tracking of listeners that are in emerging markets. That would be like in Africa and those kinds, because a lot of the listening apps that are used outside of the U.S. and those emerging markets are supporting IPv6. So there's kind of like this feeling that somehow those shows are not being tracked in the proper way. So we don't really know sometimes what the proper listening is that's coming out of these emerging markets around the world. So I don't know.
Well, I'll contend your content is making it into those platforms.
Right. It just may not be tracked
the same.
accurately. Right.
So we'll see where this goes, and
and if this anonymizing and elimination of access to IP addresses becomes standard practice across the industry, then this whole IPv6 issue for
goes away.
Podcast hosting platforms is completely irrelevant,
right?
At that point, because we can't see any of it. So,
and it's almost like there's some people chomping at the bit, hoping this happens.
Yeah, I wonder why, Todd. I'll let you, as a listener, speculate who benefits from this.
Yeah.
I think we've mentioned it a few times already, so it shouldn't be a surprise.
Again, it's about control. It's about gatekeepers. It's about
that's the direction we're going right now.
Well,
it doesn't have to turn out like this, but it certainly seems like it might.
Again, so just so we're clear, some of this is speculation. Nothing has been announced.
Well, you can feel it.
No, I don't believe that. I'm going to stay positive on this one.
No, I'm not being pessimistic. I'm just feeling the beginnings of something.
No one has give any indication that this is going to
Apple's
happen.
The one that's really pushing.
Apple has not given any indication that they're going to do anything further than what they have talked about already, because they're not okay. To work at Apple, you got to be pretty doggone smart.
So you're talking about their recent announcement about their iCloud,
right? So they announced that, okay,
right?
That is what it is. But they're people would think that they run in a vacuum. They don't. They got a bunch of smart people over there. Really smart people.
And they listen to this show too, so.
And I'm not pandering to them. They are smart people that are working over there. Okay, you don't go to work at Apple and not have some chops. You don't get through their process. That just doesn't happen. So they know.
It's the same at Apple, the same at Google.
Same
at Apple, Google. All these platforms.
They know what we're talking about here. They know potentially the ramifications of these changes it can have to creators. So all we're here to do is just do a little bit of boom, 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 reminding them.
Well, and also point out to the greater podcast industry of some things that we need to be maybe paying attention to a little bit more, that could put a little pressure on some of these platforms to do the right thing, whatever that is.
Right.
I'm not saying what the right thing is to do entirely. I'm just saying, can't just be all about, well, from a podcaster perspective, it can't just be all about what's best for those platforms, right?
Follow the money.
But yeah, so market pressures have to pressure these companies to.
But Rob, we have
podcasting what it is that we want it to be.
We have in the scheme of things, we have a small, and I call them Akamai. That's a word I like to use. It. We have a very astute audience that listen to this show, and take what we say and take bits and pieces of it and say, And so, as you're listening to this show and you're thinking about what we're talking about here, then what you need to do is, as you're in your day in talking to other podcasters, you need to be like, hey, maybe you need to listen to the show, or explain it in the way you know best. And if you don't, send a question to us and we'll try to answer it, because we're not the best in describing this. And I can't say that I am absolutely 100% correct in all the terminology I use all the time anyway. We try to be as accurate as possible. I'm sure some people will say, no, you're wrong.
Well, there's certainly lots of people out there that are more knowledgeable on this stuff,
right?
In various aspects of it. I guess what we like to do on this show is just kind of bring the concepts together to paint a picture that's easier to understand, hopefully.
And I will say this, I think I can say this without, I volunteered for a specific group to talk about privacy within the IAB.
Mhm.
I can't talk about what we're going to talk about or who's on it or anything like that, but I say I'm participating to talk about some of these issues and formulate, hopefully, some strategy. And I'll leave it at that. And so it is a concern. And I think that we're all just, trying to figure out what we're going to do. And if this does come to fruition, so that we're not flat-footed.
Todd, does this mean that we're of a consensus here that what Brian tried to do over at National Public Radio with the RAD program was not such a bad idea?
Hey, I never said RAD
Right.
was bad.
Right.
I think just the approach was not great.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But
yeah.
in the end, with RAD, okay. It's they face the same dilemma that the Podcast 2.0 people are facing. Adoption. You don't get broad adoption. If we tried to implement RAD today, if we picked RAD back up, put it back on the table, it faces the same issues it did then that it would now, because we're going to go to Pocket Cast, we're going to go to Overcast, we're going to go to all the podcast apps and say, please, pretty please, will you single like a signal, transmit, broadcast, ping us back when someone hits play and put stop? Can you please, pretty please do that?
Yeah, and then I believe that program basically was having us upload all of the insertion points in the content, right?
So okay. And so if I'm Marco, I'm like, no, no, I'm not playing ball. I'm taking my 3 to 5% of global market share, and I'm not doing it.
Right.
And all it takes is 4, 5, 10 to say no. And then all we have is just a little, we're in no better position than we were before, because we're going to throw the Apple out. We'll throw Google out. We'll throw Spotify out. And then we'll end up with this little chunk
right.
of maybe data that we get that we'll have to extrapolate into a story that we can already extrapolate in a story other ways.
I mean, as I recall, Pocket Cast didn't even support it, and it was owned by NPR. So
yeah. So we ought to try to get them on and tell us backstory about that. I wonder if they're under NDA.
well, those folks are now owned by Automatic now, which is the owner of WordPress, right?
Yeah. So they're probably under NDA again, so they can't say anything anyway. But I don't know. We're just trying to do good for the community and keep things moving here, and trying to look out for independent podcast creators so that you can continue to build and grow your shows.
Yep, that's true.
And if all this comes to all the fruition, Rob, then my 6 months of dev time we're spending on doing what we're planning to do with stats, we'll just flush it down the toilet.
That, along with compliance for IAB certification, right? Yeah.
Oh, and the tens of thousands of dollars we've spent on that.
Yeah.
I might really put my head through a concrete wall.
Right. Well, hopefully it doesn't come down to this, but
let's do a call. We're ready to have a chit chat.
Let's stay vigilant on this topic, right? So anyway, I think we made it to the end, Todd.
Oh my gosh, we have. And we had a pretty good audience with us today. Some of you didn't check in and say hello. And our YouTube audience wasn't too bad either. No one said hello over there. So you guys are being shy. And we do take anonymous emails. So if you've got a thought on this, we'd love to hear from you. Now, here's the skinny, though, Rob. I'm out next week. So
All right. That's
I
fine.
leave for ATD in Salt Lake City on Saturday. Then I fly out Wednesday afternoon and go down to Dragon Con.
Oh, that's right.
It's
Dragon
gonna
Con is
be
coming up.
like 10 days straight where I have to live inside a mask. So that's just gonna suck. 8 to 10
Yeah.
8 to 10 hours and see I haven't had to, I wear a mask to a store or whatever, but I haven't had, or on an airplane, but I haven't had to be in a mask every day like like
All
early
day long.
responders and all those other
Right.
folks. So I guess I get to and some people are saying, oh, boo hoo.
Right. Okay. Well, next, that's September 1st.
Yeah, so I don't get back. So the next show will be
On the 8th. On the 8th, right? Is that right?
the 8th. The next show will be the
8th.
8th. Yep. So we'll
And
have,
then I'm out of the pocket on the 15th.
oh, okay.
So we can't do a show on the 15th either. So
All right. So we've gotten a little break and work and give some people some things to talk about.
right.
So
So we'll be back on the 8th, I believe.
yep. So good anonymous
September.
information is good. Feed us that stuff. We're happy to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get an interesting guest on the 8th show. I know I've been saying that. I just need to pull the trigger. And I think if we have a little bit of gap here, I might be able to pull it together.
All right. Sounds good. So everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Todd at blueberry.com at Geek News. We want you to follow, subscribe to the New Media Show. Just go over to their website and smash that button. And come over
Hit
to the
that button.
YouTube
Hit that button.
site as well. Rob?
Hit that button, right? Smash that button and
That's right.
subscribe to our channel.
That's right. Wherever it's at.
Yeah, right. Somewhere on the below.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I can be reached on Twitter as well if you want to find me over there at Rob Greenlee. And you can send me an email if you want, robg@lipson.com. Love to hear from you. Love to get your feedback. Love to get some conversation going on this topic as we look to the future of podcast metrics and how we do all this stuff. Because I think it's great, all of the discussion that's going on around this topic. I think it's all great, and everybody is really kind of pointing out that there's some things for us to be working on here.
And using the IB download spec, how do you get more than 1,000? If you have 1,000 downloads on IB spec, how do you get to a much higher play number?
It's called on a calculator, Todd. You push whatever that number is times 5 equals.
All right, everybody. Let's see if I can.
All right.
Let's see if I can get us out of here.
Yes.
Well, I don't know what this one is. No, not that one. I'm in the wrong bank. I'm not ready. Okay, here we go. This one might get us. I'm going to shut YouTube down because we may get banned from YouTube if I play this. So, YouTube, you guys are leaving first. See you later.
Bye.
Good to go. That's weird.